A teenage boy sits hunched over a laptop, fingers flying, sweat rolling down his forehead. Ping. A message appears. We saw what you did. The screen goes black. Laughter, cold, mechanical, echoes. Cut to. He's running. Through alleys, down sidewalks, eyes wide, hunted by someone or something he can't even name. Controlled. Humiliated. Dehumanized. In the final shot, he stands alone in the woods. The phone rings. A voice says, "Game over." I know implants. No AI. No futuristic tech. And yet this may be the most chilling episode Black Mirror has ever produced. This is Shut Up and Dance. Firecracker. The premise is painfully simple. A seemingly ordinary teenager is blackmailed by hackers after they capture private footage through his webcam. What follows is a psychological hostage crisis, one that escalates into a brutal, irreversible spiral. But the scariest part isn't the hackers. It's the episode's central revelation. Your sense of right and wrong might be nothing more than a narrative shaped by what you're allowed to know. Pushpin. There are no sci-fi gadgets here, just a Wi-Fi signal and a webcam. Pushpin. No futuristic dystopia, just today's internet, stripped of its filters. Pushpin. No evil mastermind, just the awful realization. We are all players in a collective, anonymous morality game. Direct hit. The question driving this episode and this breakdown is simple. What happens to evil when everyone becomes a watcher? In today's analysis, we'll dig deep into these unsolved creative riddles. Why is this the darkest episode of Black Mirror, despite having no speculative tech at all? Why is the protagonist's true crime revealed only in the final minute? Is this a brutal critique of internet outrage culture and the thrill of anonymous punishment? And that chilling final montage, was it justice or just digital sadism disguised as fairness? Film projector. This isn't a thriller. It's a pressure test of our society's moral reflexes. If you're ready to confront what a real surveillance society looks like, welcome to this episode of Black Mirror Decoded. Can Black Mirror still work without futuristic tech? That question was the creative spark behind Shut Up and Dance, arguably the most radical genre experiment in the entire series. For creator Charlie Brooker, Black Mirror was never just about speculative technology. The heart of the show, he insists, is this: what happens when human behavior meets the pressure of systemic power? So he set out to make an episode with no gadgets, no sci-fi world building, and no overt Black Mirror tech. Just reality, raw, familiar, and terrifyingly close. Brain. In interviews, Brooker has cited real-life sextortion cases as the emotional blueprint for this episode, stories of teens blackmailed online, pushed to the brink, some even dying by suicide. One particular BBC investigation from 2014 reported a sharp rise in teenage suicide linked to webcam extortion. This, Brooker said, felt like a non-tech Black Mirror scenario, still entirely on-brand, but stripped to its moral bones. Movie camera director James Watkins and the choice of invisible violence. Watkins, best known for The Woman in Black, brought a slow-burn sensibility to the table. He understood that psychological pressure, not jump scares, is what sticks with you long after the credits roll. His directorial goal was brutally clear. I don't want to scare you. I want to make it hard for you to breathe. He worked with the cinematographer to use compressed depth of field and ultra-close framing, pulling viewers so close to Kenny that every heartbeat, every twitch, every breath feels shared and suffocating. Writing hand, the most controversial twist in Black Mirror history. Originally, Kenny was written as a straightforward victim, a teenager unjustly tormented by online vigilantes. The story was meant as a critique of shame-based punishment culture. But during rewrites, Brooker made a last-minute call that changed everything. Kenny wasn't innocent. He was watching child pornography. This twist was added so late that some cast members weren't told during filming to keep their performances unfiltered. Why risk alienating the audience? Because in Brooker's words, I wanted to test the viewer's moral threshold. Can you still feel empathy for someone who did something awful, if the punishment goes too far? The final showdown that almost got cut. The brutal death match between Kenny and another victim, live-streamed for a faceless audience, almost didn't make it to air. Netflix's internal standards team flagged it as potentially inciting copycat behavior. But Brooker fought to keep it. His rationale: it's not violence for shock. It's the logical endpoint of a society where shame becomes crowdsourced justice. Light bulb: what makes Shut Up and Dance so disturbing isn't the violence. It's the realism. No sci-fi lens. No voice-over commentary. No time skips or digital overlays. Just cold, matter-of-fact realism. And in that realism, Brooker crafted perhaps the most hellish vision in all of Black Mirror, because it already exists. It's not the future. It's the internet, today. Oppression without monsters. Shut Up and Dance isn't scary because of what you see. It's terrifying because of what you're forced to feel. Director James Watkins doesn't rely on horror tropes or loud jump scares. Instead, he builds what can only be described as empathic suffocation, a claustrophobic collapse of moral certainty. He uses 3 key visual strategies to trap the viewer not as a spectator, but as an accomplice. Movie camera-tight close-ups plus handheld tracking plus abrupt cuts. Every shot sticks to Kenny like a shadow. Whether he's riding a bike, robbing a bank, or running through the woods, the camera clings to his face within inches, shaky, sweaty, and frantic. You don't watch him follow orders. You feel like you're helping him follow them. This isn't observation. It's forced participation. Artist palette color shift, from normalcy to surveillance bleed. The first 10 minutes play out in warm, natural light, Kenny at work, helping his mom, just a regular teen. But the moment the blackmail kicks in, the visual palette collapses into sterile, bluish greens and sickly grays. By the final act in the woods, everything is nearly monochrome. The message is clear. He's no longer a person. He's a target in a system. Mobile phone interface design equals cold bureaucratic tyranny. Every message Kenny receives is white screen minimalism. No emojis, no UI fluff, just clean sans serif text, Helvetica style. That's not an aesthetic choice. It's psychological design. These messages don't sound like a hacker. They sound like a system. They sound like protocol. Performing arts character breakdown. Kenny, the shadow of innocence. You think he's a victim. He acts like a victim. But in truth, he's the projection of modern shame. His arc is not from fear to defiance, but from denial to collapse. Keyword, self-loathing. He never even tries to fight back, because deep down, he knows he can't justify who he really is. Hector, the mirror for middle-class double lives. He's a dad, a husband, and a man having affairs on the side. He's not evil, but he is a coward. He tells Kenny this is wrong, and still obeys every command. Why? Because what he truly fears isn't destruction. It's public humiliation. That's a painfully accurate read of our digital culture. People aren't afraid of consequences. They're afraid of losing their brand. The other victims, a silent jury in a systemic trial. Did you catch all the names on the final email dump? Strangers. Unconnected. Rounded up like cattle. No trial. No appeal. Just exposure. That's the darkest joke of all. In an anonymous society, no one is safe from being the next target. Brain, this isn't fiction. It's moral Cold War in real time. The forest fight equals crowdsourced Judgment Day. The scene where 2 victims are ordered to fight isn't a battle. It's a ritual. A system of anonymous justice where power doesn't need to swing the hammer. It just needs to hand out the instructions. Even you, as a viewer, may unconsciously wonder, well, maybe the winner deserved to live. That's the trap. That's how moral thought gets gamified. Winnie the Pooh equals visual IED. Kenny's sister is seen holding a stuffed bear, a cute nod to innocence. But in context, it's a gut punch. That bear is childhood. Kenny's crime is against children. It's one of the most psychologically violent images in Black Mirror because it weaponizes nostalgia itself. Radiohead's exit music for a film equals irony at full volume. The song's original meaning, 2 lovers running from tyranny. But here, it scores the quiet cleanup of systemic punishment. You think it's a moment of release. It's actually the moment the net tightens. Not a thriller, it's a countdown to shame. Shut Up and Dance unfolds in strict real time. No flashbacks. No dream sequences. No plot twists in the traditional sense. Just one continuous timeline, and yet it leaves your sense of morality in pieces. Pushpin, every twist isn't in the story, it's in you. First, he's blackmailed. You think, poor kid. Then he follows orders. You think, he's scared. Then he robs a bank. You think, he's being coerced. Then the ending hits, and you realize, you've been manipulated too. This isn't plot-driven. It's perception-driven. Director James Watkins strips away fancy editing to focus on one thing, your shifting moral alignment. It's less what happens, and more when do you realize you back the wrong side. Lateral comparison, how Brooker builds emotional collapse. Let's compare this to other episodes. Each episode of Black Mirror builds its own moral ecosystem, anchored in different tech concepts and emotional arcs. But Shut Up and Dance hits differently. It's not just disturbing, it's dismantling. In Nosedive, a world governed by social ratings slowly strangles its protagonist in curated perfection. The emotional arc builds pressure until it bursts, ending in a cathartic collapse that feels strangely liberating. White Bear traps its main character and the audience in a justice system that turns punishment into performance. What begins in confusion spirals into outrage, and the ending slams down like a gavel, cold, condemning, absolute. Then there's Shut Up and Dance, the most brutally realistic of the three. No futuristic tech, no sci-fi device, just a laptop, a webcam, and a teenager caught in the crosshairs of shame. The story draws us in with sympathy, only to pull the rug out from under us. It doesn't build toward clarity, it dissolves it. And the ending doesn't release tension, it detonates it. What's left is dread, a moral implosion. Brooker's intent here is crystal clear: to break your habit of automatic empathy, to force you to realize that your emotions can be manipulated as easily as your data. In his own words, "We're so used to siding with the underdog, we forget to ask if they're actually innocent." And that's what pissed a lot of people off. You were rooting for Kenny, then realized you were defending a pedophile. And worse, he never asked you to. You volunteered your empathy. Brain critiquing justice or encouraging it. Newspaper psychological critics, The Guardian. This is a takedown of shame as a control mechanism. Tech isn't a tool, it's a weapon for emotional punishment. To them, the hacker isn't a villain, but a symbol of anonymous moral authority. We don't really want justice, we want pain. Online justice is just a crowd-pleasing execution. Firecracker reactionary critics, Reddit extremists. This is apologism for predators. It spits on moral decency. This crowd can't stand the twist. But their anger only proves Brooker's point. Can you handle the truth being darker than you wanted? Film Projector, Postmodern Narrativists, Cinema Studies Review. This isn't classic Black Mirror, it's White Bear flipped inside out. One makes you feel satisfaction watching punishment. The other forces you to realize you're part of the mob. Video game, gamified punishment metaphor. Think about it. Tasks delivered via text. Anonymous judges. Public scorekeeping. Is that so different from League of Legends reporting systems? YouTube demonetization? TikTok shadow bans? He didn't enter a digital prison. He walked into our world, a low-grade punishment system, powered by anonymous outrage. Speech balloon, so why is it called Shut Up and Dance? Because that's the whole point. No time to explain. Just follow orders. If you protest, you're kicked out. You're not here to think. You're here to perform. So you stay quiet. And you dance. Who built the structure of anonymous violence? Not the government. ***, we did. Shut Up and Dance isn't really about hacktivist justice. It's a psychological autopsy of a society that quietly outsourced morality. The real question it asks is chilling. When did we start outsourcing justice to strangers? And worse, when did we start enjoying the pain of others? There are no true villains in this story. No Cape heroes delivering justice. Just people watching. And doing nothing. A mother didn't do anything wrong, yet her son ended up dead. The hackers never appear, yet orchestrate a brutal chain of humiliation. And you, the viewer, spent the whole episode decoding clues, feeling sorry, maybe even rooting for the wrong person. That's Brooker's sharpest irony. It's not the system that killed him. It's the system we all silently consent to. The protagonist isn't trying to survive. He's trying to protect his image. Think about it. Kenny never calls the police. Never confides in his mom. Never tries to escape, even when he's told to fight another stranger to the death. That's not lazy writing. That's painfully accurate modern psychology. He's not afraid of dying. He's afraid of being exposed. That's what real fear looks like in the age of social media. In today's world, your identity isn't who you are, it's who people think you are. And Shut Up and Dance turns that into a psychological experiment with no way out. A reversal of moral logic. The system doesn't punish to restore order, it punishes to sustain itself. The hacker's control in the episode mirrors how modern digital platforms operate. No law, no guns, just your automatic participation. You check the notification. You click I agree. You assume this is what you chose. That's the show's cruelest truth. You weren't forced to follow the rules. You clicked the box. Just once. And that was enough to trap you forever. Systemic metaphor, anonymous platforms are the digital gallows. When this episode aired, some thought it was dystopian fiction. But in the years since the world caught up, sextortion and online blackmail exploded. Teenage suicides linked to cyberbullying spiked, especially on TikTok and Snapchat. Shadow banning became a widespread but opaque method of silencing users. AI moderation errors have cost people their jobs, visas, scholarships, without any clear recourse. Everything the show predicted, email leaks, public shaming, emotional manipulation, isn't a warning anymore. It's standard operating procedure. Why don't we rebel? Because like Kenny, we're not afraid of the consequences. We're afraid of going viral. The title decoded, Shut Up and Dance equals algorithm obedience. It sounds like a joke, but it's actually an order. Don't explain. Don't resist. Don't ask questions. Just perform. Comply. Stay in the system. If you don't dance to the algorithm's rhythm, you get dropped from a playlist. It's not justice. It's maintenance. It's performance for the sake of the platform. And here's the final punchline. You're not dancing for yourself. You're dancing for the system. But the music was never yours to choose. Why was the public so divided? Because this episode hits too close to home. When Shut Up and Dance aired, the response from viewers was explosively polarized. White heavy checkmark, some praised it as Black Mirror's most gut-wrenching episode, brilliantly unmasking the invisible machinery of modern shame and punishment. Crossmark, others were outraged. You made us empathize with a pedophile. This is emotional manipulation. You're trying to redeem the irredeemable. That divide wasn't an accident. It was part of the experiment. The episode never tells you who's right or wrong. It forces you to confront a deeper, more uncomfortable truth. The real question isn't who you sided with, but why. Was it a moral choice? Or just emotional reflex? In other words, Brooker is asking, who do you empathize with? Why do you empathize? And has your empathy already been hijacked by algorithms and narrative tricks? Who holds the power in this morally sanctioned nightmare? Pushpin the hackers? They're not characters. They're a stand-in for the collective conscience of online culture. A digital vigilante hive mind. The Reddit mob. The cancel swarm. The doxers. The meme assassins. They don't need laws. They don't need justification. All they need is one phrase, he deserved it. Once that label sticks, your life can be destroyed. No court, no due process, no questions asked. Pushpin the viewers? That's us. The audience. We didn't send the text. We didn't pull the trigger. But we watched. We clicked. We commented. And that final you got played text? It wasn't just for Kenny. It was for us. The most terrifying part of the episode isn't the crime. It's the pleasure people take in watching punishment. The real ethical test of Shut Up and Dance isn't, did Kenny deserve to die? It's this. Do you believe suffering is okay, as long as the person is bad enough? Because if so, welcome to the real Black Mirror, where justice has been replaced with performance. And morality is just another feedback loop. On social media, there's no time for facts. No time for context. If your image collapses, you're guilty. If you're exposed, you're done. And if punishing you brings engagement, you're toast. It's moral capitalism. And the product being sold is punishment. The system doesn't wait for proof. It only watches for negative signals. That's the real horror. Kenny doesn't just die. He dies and no one cares. No one in the story says, maybe we went too far. There's no grief. No reflection. No cleanup. The program keeps running. The viewers keep scrolling. And Kenny's shame, his literal body, is left to rot. Because that's the machine's most terrifying feature. It has no author. No endpoint. No conscience. This episode wasn't fiction. It was a case study in what already exists. Mobile phone with arrow TikTok's shadow ban mechanism. Too many reports equals automatic invisibility. Face without mouth HireView's emotion reading job interview software. Your face doesn't feel right. You're out. Receipt Google's ad suspension bot. One mistaken strike and your income's gone, no appeal. And none of these systems will explain themselves. Because their logic is chillingly simple. You weren't wronged. You just stopped being useful. Has the future already arrived? Which part of Shut Up and Dance are we living through right now? Firecracker, this isn't a warning. It's a live demo. When Shut Up and Dance aired in 2016, it felt like a terrifying possibility. 8 years later, it reads less like science fiction and more like a documentary in slow motion. Let's take a look at the real-world systems that now eerily mirror the anonymous punishment machine shown in the episode. Pushpin sextortion isn't fringe anymore. It's gone global. According to FBI reports, over 100 teens in the U.S. died by suicide in 2023 after being targeted by online sexual extortion. The tactics: hackers hijack webcams or use phishing links to steal intimate images, then threaten to send them to family, classmates, or coworkers. In many cases, the victims were just 13 to 15 years old. And it didn't matter if the image was intentional or not. Snapchat, Instagram, and TikTok have become the primary vectors. Sound familiar? That's Kenny's entire story arc. Shame weaponized, monetized, and delivered straight back to you by algorithm. Pushpin, we now live in a world where not being algorithm-friendly can erase you. Welcome to the age of shadow punishment. The logic behind it: you don't have to do something wrong. If the system thinks you might make others uncomfortable, you can be silently wiped out. Just like the show's invisible hand of anonymous retribution, Pushpin data is now driving real-life social exclusion. More and more critical life opportunities are quietly being tied to your digital footprint. Job screenings, higher view facial expressions, and voice tone analyzed to assess cultural fit. Health insurance, your Instagram habits may affect your premium. Housing or loan approvals, controversial tweets? It might cost you. AI trust scoring systems, your purchase history, ratings, and GPS movements feed a reliability profile. You're not losing access because you broke a rule. You're losing it because you no longer look normal to a machine. Just like Kenny. He had no criminal record, but the system still gave him no shot at redemption. The system doesn't care who you are. It only cares whether you've been flagged. Pushpin, no one's forcing you, but you did click the button. You think you're in control, but in reality, you've already signed the contract without reading it. Every time you clicked, "I agree." Every time you granted camera access. Every time you posted, liked, shared someone else's humiliation. That wasn't a breach of privacy. That was consensual surrender, engineered by design. Just like the final moments of the episode. You hit play. What happens next? That's up to the system now. Pushpin, we've raised an entire generation of shame-dependent digital citizens. Young people today grow up balancing shame and validation like it's a second nervous system. Their identity is built on algorithmic feedback. Their emotions are filtered through platforms. Their fear of public humiliation is a daily baseline. And their survival mantra is simple: just don't get exposed. Psychologists now call this platform-induced shame reflex, an internalized behavioral loop where users self-police to avoid being shamed, not because of morality, but because of visibility. In the end, Shut Up and Dance didn't predict the future. It just watched what we were doing in the present, and showed us what happens when a society no longer punishes crime, but vulnerability. Shut Up and Dance is no longer just an episode, it's a digital-era shame totem. There's no futuristic tech here. No glowing interfaces, no mind chips, no augmented reality goggles. And yet, this episode is constantly cited as the most terrifying Black Mirror episode because it's not sci-fi. It's real. In fact, Shut Up and Dance has become cultural shorthand for something deeper and darker. Let's explore just how deeply it's embedded itself in the public psyche. It's a shut up and dance world. Reddit speak. This quote has become its own meme, resurfacing anytime shame goes viral. Online harassment exposés. Sextortion cases. Teenagers publicly humiliated and driven offline. Celebrities or influencers canceled after private details go public. It's no longer just a title, it's a diagnosis. We live in a world where your only option is to shut up and perform for the crowd. Chart decreasing in academic psychology, the episode is now case study material. Cited in multiple peer-reviewed journals, the episode has sparked rigorous analysis of shame, digital anxiety, and emotional conditioning among adolescents. Journal of Adolescent Mental Health, 2020. Digital Shame as a Form of Behavioral Conditioning. Cyber Psychology Review, 2022. The Kenny Effect, When Fear of Exposure Outweighs Fear of Death. Shut Up and Dance has evolved beyond entertainment. It's now being used to clinically map the emotional wreckage of growing up online. Film Projector, films that echo Shut Up and Dance's themes. Clapperboard Unfriended, 2014. Real-time horror via group video chat. Revenge, betrayal, and public shame unfold in brutal digital symmetry. Like Shut Up and Dance, the real monster isn't the tech, it's the people behind the screens. Clapperboard The Circle, 2017. A cautionary tale about radical transparency in a hyper-surveilled tech utopia. It asks the same core question. Have we built a prison and called it self-expression? Clapperboard Cam, 2018. A streamer loses control over online identity to a deepfake-style double. A haunting visual metaphor for what happens when platforms own your persona and you no longer recognize yourself. Clapperboard The Cleaners, 2018, documentary. A real-life horror show. Content moderators in third-world digital sweatshops quietly deciding whose lives and images get erased. This is Shut Up and Dance's infrastructure exposed. Books if you want to understand the architecture of algorithmic shame. Read these. Blue Book, So You've Been Publicly Shamed by John Ronson. A deep dive into cancel culture and moral shaming, from celebrity missteps to ordinary people destroyed by a tweet. Keywords: shame spiral, mob justice, identity collapse. Blue Book, The Age of Surveillance Capitalism by Shoshana Zuboff. How your data, behavior, and emotions are mined and sold, not for security, but for control. It explains why the more afraid you are, the more valuable you become to the platform. Blue Book, Cyberpsychology, An Introduction to Human-Computer Interaction. A foundational academic text breaking down how digital structures shape our emotions, shame cycles, and identity disorders. The section on digital persona anxiety is Kenny's psychological blueprint. Brain, the real horror isn't the hacker. It's you. When you look closely, what Shut Up and Dance really exposes is the brutal evolution from traditional justice to what we now live with, platform justice. In the old world, justice was structured. A crime had to be proven. Motives were known, evidence examined. Punishment was delivered by a system, visible, traceable, finite. You did the time, then you were done. But in the world of platforms, justice doesn't work that way anymore. You're no longer punished for a clear crime, but for something crowds have decided feels wrong. The motive? Ambiguous, often speculative, passed along like digital gossip. And instead of a sentence handed down by a court, you're dragged across feeds, reposted, memified. Humiliation goes viral. There's no moment of closure. No one slams the gavel and says time served. Your shame loops forever, replayed on the infinite scroll, locked in place by a system that never forgets and never forgives. In other words, you weren't executed. You were dissolved in front of everyone. You weren't convicted. You were rated as no longer worth keeping around. Brooker didn't show us a digital dystopia. He handed us a mirror and quietly whispered, you weren't sentenced to death. You were collectively deleted. The ending of Shut Up and Dance offers no climax, no redemption. No one steps in to say, he's just a kid. No platform or authority reflects on this anonymous public execution. Even the audience gets no release, no moment to feel righteous or vindicated. Because this episode wasn't made to heal you. It was made to disassemble you. It dismantles your belief in just punishment. It burns down the fantasy that the audience is innocent. It shatters the algorithmic lie that shame equals justice. This is the show's core reversal. Pushpin, the protagonist, is guilty, yet you still flinch at his pain. Pushpin, the punishment, feels justified, yet leaves you hollow. Pushpin, you thought you were watching a revenge thriller, but you were looking into a mirror. Performing arts. And just like the hacker's final message to Kenny, you got played. But let's reinterpret it. You got played, not by hackers, but by your own belief that shame equals truth. You were never tricked by the system. You were tricked by the idea that shame means guilt. Empathy means excusing. Staying silent means staying safe. Brain, here's the real question. Direct hit: if Kenny wasn't a pedophile, would your rage still hold up? Direct hit: if he were your brother, your son, or who you were at 13, would you still deny him a chance to turn around? Direct hit: and if your entire identity were reduced to your most shameful moment, what would you have left? Speech balloon, drop one emoji in the comments to describe your gut reaction after watching. Brain, mind blown. Face with steam from nose, furious. Heartbroken. Face without mouth, speechless. Fire, ready to fight the system. Muted speaker, just want to disappear. Pushpin, next episode preview. We're heading to Black Mirror Season 3, Episode 4, San Junipero, From Digital Hell to Digital Heaven, a sci-fi love story about memory, choice, and eternal life in the cloud. Subscribe. Hit the bell. We don't rate you here, but we read every piece of truth you leave behind.